I am Adam Weil, partner at White Rabbit Group. Welcome to the Pixel Perfect Podcast, where we share knowledge, experiences, and motivations from creatives and entrepreneurs. All right, let's get started. I'm excited to talk with Daniel Weiner. Daniel owns a consultancy called You Should Talk To that pairs brand marketing agencies with basically brand marketers and vets those in the process. And we're going to learn a little bit about that in this discussion. He's been in the brand and marketing world for over 15 years, working across a variety of roles. So everything from, product marketing to social media, business development, director of community. And speaking of community, he also runs a private small dinner group for marketing leaders called You Should Eat With. Um, and I actually met Daniel on stage at the Indie Agency News event in Chicago a couple weeks ago and asked him to come on and talk about how he plays matchmaker with agencies and clients and what he's seen in the market overall to help out. So Daniel, happy to have you on.
Thank you for having us. I'll start with I'll give you some shit. Can we curse on this? It's pronounced Weiner. I've got the funny last name.
Oh, so, it is okay.
The funny pronunciation. So,
well, you threw me through a curveball because I thought I was so certain it was Weiner because my last name is Wei as well, but it's German, which is pronounced Weil, so it's Weil.
Would have had a less tormented childhood with that. So no, it is Weiner. So no, thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, man, that's funny. What is the heritage name of the name?
Oh boy, if my parents are listening, they're gonna give me shit now. I'm not 100% a mutt of European places as far as I understand.
Yep.
Okay. I'm better at talking about the agency stuff than my lineage.
Less than the heritage. Okay, no problem. I was the same way, but I just did my 23andMe recently, and it was pretty interesting. I recommend it to you and others listening. But let's dive into the vetting stuff. So, for those that, not everyone has worked with an agency consultant before and kind of knows that process. So just give us a high level, like what's the process kind of 101 there? Tell us how that works.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends. There's different flavors and forms of what I do, from traditional search consultants to matchmakers. I like to think I sit somewhere in between, but virtually anything and everything I do starts with chatting with a brand, talking through needs, timeline, and budget, and then kind of going from there in terms of what they're looking to do, what my involvement's going to be, and how long all of that is going to take. How fast a brand wants to move, which generally is extremely fast. Once they get to me, everybody wants an agency like the next day. So
right.
The process is really just kicks off with understanding like what the brand is trying to do, what the services look like, their budget, their scope, and also really understanding like what's gotten to this moment. Generally something has gone, I'll use air quotes, wrong with another agency, and they're looking to make a change. So really understanding what got us here.
Got it. So I think most agencies can understand the idea of the matchmaking and know what a good fit looks like. I'm sure everyone's had that experience where it's just kind of feels light. The client is like, yeah, we're looking for exactly what you guys do. And the agency is like, wow, we serve people that look exactly like you. And that's awesome. But, it doesn't always go that smooth. So tell us a little bit about what maybe some of the challenges or failure points even look like. I'd love to hear what that looks like. Where do matches maybe break down? Because I think that would be helpful to know.
Yeah, this isn't to pat myself on the back. Like when I'm involved, I like to think that those different points are mitigated somewhat because I'm talking to a brand and getting like the real truth and then talking with the agency. But I think in general, like misaligned expectations, around what a brand is really looking for and what an agency really specializes in. I think there's a big a choke point or failure point often with what things cost, expectations in terms of budget, expectations in terms of timing. AI has thrown like a whole loop into the process of expectations. But yeah, if I had to pick one thing, it would be misaligned expectations from both sides on what's going on in the relationship, who's working on it, the timing, the money, all of it.
And how do you try to suss out those issues early on?
Astronomical amount of transparency and honesty, truthfully. Like
Mm,
again, this isn't to pat myself on the back. A lot of the agencies I work with, work with other folks who do what I do, and I've consistently gotten, for the last 6 years of doing this, that you're disgustingly honest in terms of, like, giving it to us straight.
mm,
I've maintained from the beginning, like, I don't necessarily aim to change the industry. I just want to make the processes I'm involved in as good as possible for both sides. I'm
mm.
beholden to the brand, but a partner to agencies, so it's like a unique
I hear
position
you.
I sit in. Um, but yeah, just a ton of conversation. I think the biggest way to mitigate a lot of those misaligned expectations is something I talk about on my favorite social network, LinkedIn, often, is picking up
Mhm.
the phone.
Yeah,
So many people want to send email and text and stuff like that, which there's a time and place for that, but so much is solved by like 2-minute phone calls versus like
mm,
20 email threads and stuff like that. So much
yep,
gets lost in translation. You just cannot replace, even if it's over Zoom, or Riverside in this case, face to face conversation, hearing the tone in people's voice, the inflection, and like
right.
gauging a reaction and stuff versus just going back and forth on email.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense,
I also
especially
find
in
so many people
early
are just
on.
scared to talk on the phone. I don't know
Yeah,
what it is, if it's a generational thing, but yeah, I would much prefer like the 2-minute phone call than going back and forth on email for the whole day.
I love hearing that. Anytime someone says they're scared to do something that is clearly gonna benefit them, I guess if you know how to do it well, but, just authenticity, I think, should be fine in a conversation like that. Either there's a fit or there's not a fit, and, the reason why I love that is because I think that's with the saturation of the market, you need to figure out ways to stand out, and I think the relationship, you talk about that, how important the relationship is, not just about the work. Tell me, let's dive into that a little bit. Why is the relationship so critical in your eyes, and how can you build that relationship, I guess, from scratch?
Yeah, it's important because this is like the I think I said this on stage, or like the hot take that gets me killed sometimes before I elaborate, of like the work doesn't matter
Yep.
until it does. If you're not winning the relationship, you don't get to do the work. You don't get, picked. You don't get to do the
Mhm.
work. If somebody doesn't like you, they're not even going to ask you to participate in the process to do the work. Of course, the work matters. There's 100,000 plus agencies in the U.S. alone. That's you know uh, companies that identify as an agency. So anything from big, small, medium, and two people in a garage type sized agency. So there's no shortage of options, and there are a ton of like really smart, talented people. Like there's no shortage of options for a CMO or a VP of marketing out there. And yeah, there's significantly less, I think, people who like really earn the trust and win the relationship to arrive at doing like world class work. To me, the work is like the price of admission. You
Mm,
should be able to do the thing reasonably well that you are pitching. But I talk about
mm,
it frequently. Like you can be a you can be a pretty shitty agency, but really likable and win a lot of business. Like
mm,
you'll
mhm,
eventually get fired, presumably, if you suck at
mm.
what you do, of course. But yeah, you don't get to do any of the work. Like the first step is the relationship stuff in any process.
Yeah. Why do you think that's such a challenge for a lot of agencies? Because I think we've all heard that in some way, shape, or form before, but and I work with a lot of agencies too, so I have a similar sentiment. A lot fail when it comes to the relationship. Well, what's going on there? What do you think? Why?
I say this with love because I think agencies can't get out of their own way, and everybody drinks their own Kool-Aid and believes their own narrative to agree. Agencies often tell me like, "Oh, we're the best at X," and my eyes glaze over a little because I don't really know what that means. Truthfully,
Mm,
like so much of the work that agencies do is subjective, right? Like if a CMO told me, "Oh, like Adam and his team presented," I'll just use like creative because it's super
mm,
subjective. They presented some creative and it missed the mark, Be like,
mhm,
okay, well, creative's hard, subjective, we talk about it. But if they told me you were 5 minutes late, to the call or were arrogant or just seemed like a dick. Like,
Mm,
those are you can't come back from those things, and you can't really, like, teach
mm,
somebody how to not be those things, truthfully,
mm,
like, it's inside of them, so, I think a lot of that is, yeah, like, everybody says win on the relationship, but you either have it or you don't, and it either works or it doesn't, like, you vibe with the people on the other side.
mm,
But yeah, like, in general, I think the agencies I see be the most successful come from, like, a really humble place, and they understand what I just said for better or worse is probably right. Like there is a shitload of agencies out there who do plus or minus, I don't know, 10% the same type of stuff, right? Like
mm,
you should be thinking about making the lives of the marketing leaders easier and
mm,
better. You should be thinking about like their career advancement that benefits both sides. Like there's so many things that have nothing to do with the work. And for the
mm,
most part, whenever a brand gets to me and they're replacing an agency, one of my first questions is, as I mentioned, like, what got us here?
mhm,
I can't think of a single time where they have mentioned the work first, right?
mm,
Like sometimes it's, yeah, the work hasn't been great, but it's never the first thing. It's
mm,
usually like, oh, our team has turned over so many times. I've had 6 account people,
mm,
or a million other things outside of the work. So that's why I am
mm.
so incredibly bullish on the relationship side of it.
Yeah. I wanna just pull on that a little bit more. Is there
Yeah.
anything else, um, there that people can take away where 'cause, we've all been around agencies that are maybe a little bit more, call it arrogant and, yeah, like drink their own Kool-Aid. But I do think there are a lot of agencies that are trying to get better out there. Are there tactics or strategies, just ways of being that can help them when it comes to the relationship game?
Yeah, I think there's like a small area in the middle that's perfect because I think it's really important to have like a really strong POV. But like no one is 100% right. Right. And
Mm,
like the goal is collaboration and co-creation with both sides to create, amazing work and propel a brand forward, which usually propels an agency forward. um,
mm,
yeah, the strong POV versus arrogance, I think, is like a little bit of a nuanced thing that again is like really
mm,
difficult to teach. You
mm,
kind of either are arrogant or you're not arrogant. But yeah, I
mm,
think like just getting in front of more people that's not over email, like you should
mm,
be giving without the expectation of receiving, right? So like I throw dinners. First dinner I threw, I think 20 CMOs and VPs. I didn't say a single word at the beginning to sell or do anything to the point where like a friend of mine who was sitting next to me was like, you should tell everybody what you do. And I
mm,
really didn't want to because I didn't want it to see perceived as, selling. So
mhm,
again, it's easier said than done of, oh, like just get in front of a room of CMOs. But yeah, like I
mhm,
haven't quote unquote like asked for like the last 15 years of my career. And eventually things, have come to me and found me that are beneficial to me. But yeah,
mm,
doing things that benefit who you want to do business with, inviting people to do a podcast, throwing dinners, throwing events, and just getting out there more and mingling, I think,
mm,
without selling.
mhm. Yeah,
It's so easy to at the end of the conversation say, "And if you need an agency, we would love to chat," you know?
right.
And I, for the most part, like resist the temptation to like they know. They like everybody knows. They know you want their money. You know that they want, like
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
knows what's going on. And it's the people who don't ask and are patient, to a degree that I think win in the long run. So I think thinking long term versus short term is like such a huge benefit.
Mhm. Yeah, love those examples. Yeah, that's helpful to think about. Yeah, and I think the POV is a good point too, because sometimes I think folks or agencies will go too hard on the POV, and that's where you can come across as kind of rigid or arrogant, or they're kind of like too muddied and it's not super strong. But if you can have like like a really strong POV, but then also balance it with like being collaborative and open, like that's where that nuance you were talking about, I feel like comes in. It's hard to teach that for sure.
it's also hard because everything I think should ladder back to like know your audience, right? So
Mm, mhm.
so much of this advice that I'm giving is like damned if you do, damned if you don't, which is why until something becomes a pattern, I encourage agencies not really to like go crazy and change something based on one thing. You could give a
Right.
strong POV and be open to, flexibility from a CMO and they go, "Oh, they didn't have a strong enough POV," like
Mhm, mhm.
and vice versa. They,
Right,
they were too much of a pushover or like
mhm,
they had too little of a, like until something
right,
happens 10 times, like if you've made it to a certain revenue or like things are going well, like I would continue down the path of what has worked for you because again, like knowing what the audience, the CMO, the buying committee, the VP of marketing, what they're looking for to me is like the biggest unlock.
right, right. That's true. No matter how good you are, you're never gonna appeal to everyone.
Sure won't.
So that's an important attitude to have. I think part of it too is kinda like what you mentioned is knowing your audience, and that makes me think of niching, which is a big topic you hear about now, especially on LinkedIn, right? Everyone's talking about niching, and I
Yep.
think that's a backlash to the saturation of the market. I think it's maybe some agencies going too far into like, they're kind of overcorrecting a little bit there, but what are you seeing there as far as what's winning and what works?
Good, nice people who do reasonably good work and solve the same types of problems, So, like, I don't know, it depends how far you want to go down the niche path. Like, services or a collection of services that make sense, Like, to me, that makes total sense. It's really hard to do every service under the sun. There's also a million quote unquote services these days.
Mhm,
I don't know, like when I hear, "Oh, we only work with real estate companies," my first in my mind goes to, well, then everything looks and sounds probably like the same. How do you differentiate your customers? So like
mm,
I don't work with industry specific agencies just
mm,
because nobody asks me for that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think you should be like, I don't know if it counts as niching, like laser focused on what you do and the not necessarily like who you do it for, but the
mm,
problem you solve. And I think the easiest way to think of it is we help X type of brands with Y, problem.
mm,
That could be performance marketing and you dial into like individual problems. But yeah, I don't know. Niching, I see it all over LinkedIn as well. And
mm,
I generally work with agencies that have a wide swath of types of clients.
mm. It's really interesting what you said too. You're not getting that request. You're not getting a brand agency that's like, "Hey, I only wanna work," or sorry, a brand marketer that's saying, "I only want an agency that works within our industry." That's not really a request you're getting often or at
It
all?
is not. No, I can't think of a single time. It may again, I think of it in terms of like, it probably makes them sleep better at night, saying like, "Oh, they," but it's still no promise of, doesn't give the promise of like success in that realm.
Mm,
So again, I'm sure, I know those agencies exist, so surely some people are buying it. But yeah, like in my corner of the internet, not really a request.
mm, hmm. Yeah, that is interesting. What about on the presentation part of it? Is there anything that like a good, really good winning agency does differently as far as the pitch goes?
Yeah, they make it like 99% about the brand and the specific, uh, task at hand. I would say, like, what's actually in front of them versus, "We wanna do these 50 other things for you in the future," and they make it, like,
Mm,
1% about themselves, right?
mm,
I've sat in on a number of pitches, virtual as well as in the room, which is really cool getting to watch a bunch of agencies pitch, and, yeah, I would say, like, the things that stand out to me is agencies that consistently win, or at least like at the end of the pitch the team is like, yeah, that was awesome. They
mm,
tell like a cohesive story. It just, again, a lot of these things are like not tangible, but you feel it at the end. You're like, yeah, that made sense,
mm,
you know.
mhm,
Something else that stands out is like it's easy to say yes. So like I see pitches where like I'm not even the brand and I can go, yeah, like I know that if I said yes right now and we hired this agency, like I kind of know like how we would start, how we could
mm,
start tomorrow. And others I think are, like the ideas were good and this and that, but I don't really understand how we work together, to like
Mm,
attack this problem. Like really big ideas, but they didn't really show like how we would like do these things often.
mm,
And yeah, I think just like dumbing stuff down, like I think in the vein of like media pitches I watch, like
mm,
media is confusing. There's a million tools. It's very number heavy versus, like a big creative pitch might be like visual and you can at least point to it and say like, "Ooh, that's pretty. I like that."
mhm,
Just making things like really digestible. And I always go back to, yeah, the cohesive part. Like the story you've told start to finish makes sense.
mm. Yeah, I like what you said around making it tangible, right? Because I think agencies do have the inclination of maybe going too grandiose or too focusing too much on the idea versus connecting it to like, here's step one, here's who you're going to work with, how you're going to work with them week in, week out, like that sort of thing.
That's a huge one. Bringing, like I work with independent agencies. So, one of the biggest requests I get for pitches from brands is we want the team that is going to work on the actual business to be a part of the pitch or in the room and that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think it's like you can't fake excitement either, Like I
Mhm,
think about it in the vein of like being performative or not. Like whatever is actually like the DNA of your agency should shine through, but you can't like fake. You should be excited to be there and work on, and your team should act excited to do it as well. You can't I can't tell you how many times like I see an agency participate in something where they don't even seem excited to win it themselves. And why would the
mhm,
brand select them to like work on this thing if they don't even seem excited about it?
mm,
So yeah.
yeah. I also I feel like I'm attacking the niche agencies here, but I do feel like that is maybe a vulnerability that they have is if they're just constantly within one specific industry doing the same thing over and over. I feel like the team excitement, I see less excitement within those teams because there's no variety. They're just doing the same thing over and over.
I tend to agree.
Yeah.
There's also like not again like this is some of the things like agencies tell me, oh, we're like so unique. There's a lot of things I think, and you see it all over LinkedIn that like every agency does that I think everybody should probably like stop, like the big slide of we don't have clients, we have partners. Like every brand has seen it. To me, like it's good if you mean that, and if you're gonna like have the big slide there, like show something else about like how it looks in practice.
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
per I don't particularly love like the big emboldened CEO figurehead speech.
mhm,
I think it's more compelling to say I'm here and I care enough to show up to this, but like this is the team that is working on this. If you pick us, like I'm going to hang out in the back,
mhm, mhm,
because I think brands in 2026 like see through all of the crap. People have been around the block a bit. And yeah, they
mhm,
know like the tricks and the trades, and agencies get a bad rap because of some of those things.
mm. Do you think that they're more drawn to some of the smaller agencies where that CEO or partner level figure is more actually in the weeds? Or do you think it not really doesn't really matter as long as they trust the team that's doing the work?
I think it's both. It's compelling, to say like this is my agency, the buck stops with me. I think it's less compelling if you're involved in the process and you're on the pitch and involved and then you disappear the second the business is, the contract is signed. I think that
Mm,
actually leaves like a bad taste. But no, I think a CMO or a VP of marketing wants to know that they can pick up the phone and call XYZ person who, is the CEO and have a real conversation if they need to. But I think in general they want to know these 5 or 6 people are the ones who I'm dealing with every single day. Yeah, I want to see them front and center versus a pitch team or people who are, or the department heads who are not going to be involved in this.
mhm. Is there anything else in particular that is maybe just a kind of a deal killer at all when giving pitches?
A deal killer. Did
Visuals.
you?
I'm kind of part two on that. How important are
Sure.
visuals?
It depends on what you're showing, but I think like you have to have some sort of visual aid in a pitch, whether that's props or a deck. I think people use decks too much. I'd say they're like, pacifiers a little bit. Like, um, people care more about what you're saying. That's why I think like non-text heavy slides are great to like point at stuff and then tell a good story. But I don't want to divert from your question of a deal killer. I think just like missing the ask, right? Like a good
Mhm.
brief or a good RFP, where there's some sort of process. You've had usually or hopefully like a bunch of FaceTime with the brand, and you've asked a number of questions, and you arrive at a pitch, which is this moment in time. And I think it's a deal killer when it just falls flat, or
Mm,
like you pitch something that wasn't the core ask, right? And they
mhm,
just realize like, oh, they don't get us. I think is kind of like the notion that the brand has in that moment. And I've seen
mm,
that happen in person, and it's uncomfortable to watch.
mhm. What about, I wanna ask you some spicy ones here. What
Oh boy.
belief is flat out wrong in your opinion? There's all these talking heads on LinkedIn, everyone's got these hot takes. What do you think is flat out wrong out there?
I really do think it's the importance of the work, right? Like the work at the end of the day is 100% what matters, but there are so many groups that do good work. I think it's about finding the group that gets you more than the actual work. Like there are, again, so many agencies. Um, I think, what's another wrong one? I think it's wrong. I'll give a brand side wrong. So many brands don't want to put budgets into
Mm,
RFP documents or into briefs, and they say, "Oh, like we want you to tell us." I don't think it benefits either side. I think the brands say, "Oh, well, if we put a range or a number, the agencies are going to pick the top and stuff like that." And to me,
mhm,
like good agencies do not gouge,
mhm,
and if you're about to devote a ton of time, energy, and resources to a process, like I really think you have to know the budget.
mm,
But yeah, I think like to get back to the work part, like I say this all the time, like of course the work matters. That is what we're there for. But like to think that that is the only thing, there's just so many other things, right? And I think like making the lives of the marketing team, there is so much value in that and keeps you around for so long.
mm,
Maybe slightly different if you aspire to win, a Cannes Lion or like huge award winning work. But at the end of the day, like again, being reasonably good at what you do and fast and replying fast.
mm,
That's another big one. I see a lot of people say like replying too fast is thirsty or like
yeah,
shows you don't have anything going on. I reply like unbelievably fast, and the most successful people I know who make the most amount of money, truthfully, reply insanely fast. So I think that's like a really false narrative I see online a lot.
yeah, same, same. Of course, I gotta ask about AI. How has AI changed what buyers expect?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've seen is just because of the existence of AI, everybody thinks everything should happen astronomically faster, regardless of what it is and AI's involvement in it. And there's that like common notion at the end. If you push back on time, you're like, well, let's just like AI it and stuff. Like, there's
Yeah,
still a human needed, I think, in 2026, at least in the stuff I'm working on. But yeah, I think people already expected stuff fast and wanted to do stuff fast, and I think AI has only increased that feeling of we should be able to do this
mhm,
faster, shouldn't we?
mhm, mhm. Do you see downward pressure on pricing as much as speed or more so on the speed side?
More so on the speed side, truthfully. I haven't seen a ton yet, at least. Like I see constricted budgets and, people nervous about, what's going on in the economy and the world and saying we're going to spend on the back half of the year and stuff. But generally I see like speed being more important
Mhm,
than budget because I think overall in general, like, it's still a human business and a people business. We're all imperfect and people wait too long and decide, oh yeah, we should do that thing, we want to like capitalize on it by this, pick a date in the future or a holiday or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I see a lot of speed pressure, whereas the money matters less.
Do you see a world where agencies or small independents evolve where maybe there's a significant, like a noticeably smaller team executing on the work that's also noticeable to the client, yet the price is significantly more, but the speed is so much faster that they're okay with that? Do you see that trend happening? Do you envision that?
I think it's still too early, at least for me to say with like any level of certainty. It's probably somewhere in between. Like I think there's I always talk with money when a brand I'll use the example when a brand tells me like, "Oh, we don't know what our budget is." I can say with almost 100% certainty there is some dollar amount, whether it's right, wrong, crazy, in line, or otherwise. Where if it's $1 more, they fall out of their chair, and if it's $1 less, they go, "Oh, it's a great price."
Mhm.
I think brands are all weighing a million different factors of external pressures from CEOs and boards and things like that and trying to land somewhere in the middle. But now I think there becomes, depending on, I just use the example of creative because that's where I see the most like AI conversation happening
Mm,
around like production and design and things like that. But I think there's
mm.
probably some number where, regardless of how fast you're getting it, somebody goes, "This just feels crazy." Like I don't care if one person, like if we're getting it
Yeah.
in 12 seconds, it just feels crazy to pay that.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so most of our audience are agencies. I'm curious, if you were building an agency from scratch, you know, today, what would what would it be? What would be your focus there?
It's a good question. I think for me it would be a creative agency, largely because that's where my passion lies, and I just find creative and puns and I was a
Mm,
copywriter. I missed a missed opportunity to be a copywriter in a former life. Yeah, I still think there's so much value in creativity and storytelling and stuff like that. And at least in my mind, I know this isn't necessarily like a unique take, but as the world moves more towards these tools where like everybody hypothetically starts using them, I think you then get into the niche, same issue where things start looking and feeling the same as everybody has access to the same tools and is becoming better at using these tools. So I still think there's an immense amount of power in the stories we tell and positioning and creativity. I think AI enhances it and stuff like that. But yeah, if I was starting an
mhm.
agency today, probably creative.
Got it. Got it. I like it. Any any bets that last question for you here. If we're looking out, 3 years, say we have you on again. Was there anything in particular in the industry that you would bet big on?
In IRL, yeah, I
Mhm.
think there's just such a want for like getting out there. I think again, like I was reading this recently. I can't remember who posted this. I think I agree. Like the world died a little in 2020 with COVID, and people are like, myself included, still figuring out how to get back out there.
Mm,
In like a really thoughtful way. Pre-COVID, I would have gone to virtually like any networking thing. Now I'm astronomically more I want to know more. I want to know who's going to be there and just,
mm,
I don't need it as much on the
mhm,
work side. I want it more on the personal side and stuff like that. So I think
mm,
really hyper curated IRL experience is where I would place my chips if I were a betting man.
mm. It's a good one. Yeah, I'm seeing that as well. Well, Daniel, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you sharing all the insights. And where can people follow along your journey?
A silly amount of activity on LinkedIn. It's where I hang out the most. I also host a podcast, the You Should Talk To podcast, where I interview CMOs and VPs of marketing about what they're looking for, which people should care more about than what I'm saying about what agencies should be doing. So yeah, both those and youshouldtalkto.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll follow along your journey. Thanks so much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Pixel Perfect podcast, where we go down the rabbit hole on the journey and motivations of creatives and entrepreneurs. Stay tuned for more stories to come. Until next time.